I am going to show you how a fantastic book series can immediately improve your own D&D or OSR game. Let's get right into it.
I love this place!
All right, so I just finished a great fantasy series, and I'm sure some of you have no doubt also read. One that was written in this century, no less, and that is R. Scott Baker's Prince of Nothing series. For those that haven't read this trilogy, it follows a group of characters through a fantasy crusade across the land of Erva. The series paints pretty vivid pictures of both the Crusader and the Infidels' faiths, as well as providing very detailed world history. Now, it's not necessary to memorize every detail that Baker throws at you in order to enjoy the book series, but it does give you a sense of a bigger world with a very ancient history. And that last part is indeed important because in many ways in this series, the past becomes prologue. Some of the characters you follow through this tale are Canair Urs Skiatha, and I apologize ahead of time. I am really going to butcher some of these names. Canair is a barbarian who finds himself entangled in a war he otherwise would have no part of. I love Canair. He dubs himself the most violent of all men. There's also Anasorambor Kelus, a mysterious warrior from the north who comes from an ancient line. He's kind of the de facto hero of the series, kind of the Luke Skywalker, if you will, but he's also a bit of a sociopath, and he's not like that just to have an edgy anti-hero as the lead. There are actually reasons for the way he acts, and they actually become more important as the books go on. Now, there's also Esmenet, who is a common whore who rises to great prominence as the series goes on. Now, you heard me remark a little bit ago about how this was a good fantasy series actually written in this century, in the 2000s, as if that's a rarity. Well, it seems it sort of is. In fact, one of the critiques of the book series, usually coming from soft, noodle-armed lefties, is that it has no strong women who are not whores. Now, I think as we all know, what these people really want is a book where there's a woman warrior throwing around men like ragdolls on page 10. There's plenty of those kinds of books out there, I'm sure, but this, I'm happy to say, is not one of them. This is a book written, Are You Sitting Down?, where there's no real ulterior political agenda. It simply tells a story loosely modeled off of our own world's crusades, and it follows those characters through the events. It's actually quite refreshing. There is one final character, and he's kind of part of the focus of today's video. He's a sorcerer named Drusus Achamian. He, like all members of his order, are gifted, or plagued, if you will, by dreams of this world's first apocalypse. These dreams, where he and his fellow sorcerers of the Mandate Order, they see the deeds and the deaths of heroes of yore. Sort of an early warning system in case that apocalypse wants to come around for seconds. And as you can imagine, the end of the world does indeed become a factor in this series. Now, what I liked about Drusus and the world is the way magic and sorcery are set up in it. And this is something I think you can port over to your own D&D game in some respects. Because it involves some lore and world building, it's probably going to be ideally suited for newer campaigns, but it can also be thrown into an existing campaign where the characters maybe travel to a new land, getting on a boat, going across the sea to a place they have no knowledge of. Now think about wizards and sorcerers and how they're handled by the DM and the other players in your world. Chances are that a lot of you, when your character is created, they simply say, hey, Bob's going to be the magic user. Okay, that's great. That's fine. And really, not much more thought is given to it. Now, maybe there's a mentor NPC character out there somewhere, but usually that's as far as it goes. And if you think about it, it's kind of odd that people who can perform this kind of magic are out there in the world and they're just more or less accepted by the rest of society. You can almost hear the barkeep. Hey, aren't you the guy that can summon demons and make fire out of air? By the way, will that be cash or charge? Well, the land of Irva in the Prince of Nothing series has its sorcerers segregated into different schools. To be a sorcerer means you sort of have to belong to an order, or at least a loose confederation of them. In fact, I think there actually is a mercenary school mentioned. Now, you have to be careful here. And one of the few things that I didn't kind of like in the series was this term, school. To me, it kind of always takes the reader, or in our case, the player, out of the game, and maybe has them thinking about their own school experiences, whether that be elementary or high school. I don't know, it just seems to have so many connotations with it. And even if they overcome that, there might be some lingering confusion, with the whole Harry Potter setup where your character goes to their introduction to potions class with all their best friends, which is all essentially just a pastiche of our real high school experience. That is not what we're talking about here. The schools in this book are entirely different. Yes, young sorcerers are identified and they're taken into these schools and they begin rigorous training under a single tutor usually. And when they cast their first spell, they bear the stain of sorcery. They are heathens in this world ever after. In many ways, they formed into schools because of the persecution they faced from society at large. They only announce their presence as sorcerers when they absolutely need to, or when they maybe want to intimidate someone. Now, there's also a practical reason for laying low, and it's something you can put into the game, your D&D game, but it's going to take a little bit of buy-in from the players, and I will get to that in a moment. These schools are not just places of learning. The Mandate School of Drusus Achamian is an independent Gnostic school that's plagued by dreams of the past, but also has some serious firepower as far as spells go. Their eldritch power is a mystery that is forbidden to be shared with anyone other than other members of the order, and it's done so under pain of death. In the world, there's also the Scarlet Spires, a rival school, and they're actually the most powerful in a worldly sense. They're the de facto rulers of a place called High Anon, which is a land, a country, and they even possess their own military power in addition to their magical prowess. And then there's the Imperial Psyche, who are kind of the Joe Besser also ran school. I imagine they'd be the ones you'd end up at if you partied too hard the night before your SATs and barely managed to clock 1,000. See, that's what happens when you call these places schools. Your mind immediately goes to things like that. But the Imperial Psyche are a school pledged solely to the throne of the Nansor Empire, which is a once proud empire that's kind of had bits and pieces of it fall off throughout the centuries. And then there's also the terrifying Sisharam. These are the Fanim, or the infidels sorcerers, and they are the stuff of legend and nightmares. Not much is known of them early on, but these eyeless terrors do make themselves known as the books continue. So you can kind of see these different schools all have their own functions, their own loyalties, and their own plans. They all seem to kind of send their spies out into the world to spy on each other and gather any information that they can that would be useful to gain an upper hand. There's natural rivalries amongst all them and outright hostility, between some of them. In the book, the Sisharam have in the recent past, sent assassins to the Scarlet Spires. The Scarlet Spires have a beef with them, of course, and they are also in conflict with the Mandate School of Drusus Achamian. And they desperately want the mandate's Gnostic knowledge. The Imperial Psyche are kind of just trying to hold on. Their fortunes are kind of dwindling with those of the Nansor Empire. I mentioned earlier, there was one big reason sorcerers don't always announce their presence in this world, and that's because they can be instantly killed with very small rocks.
Very small rocks. Cider!
You see, there are these things called korae, small round stones that are carved with ancient runes. These things can utterly destroy any sorcerer if they contact that sorcerer's skin. Korae are not common, but they're also not as rare as you might think. Military units actually have special archers with these little korae attached to the ends of their arrows. They're interchangeably called trinkets in the books, and these trinkets are handed down as precious gifts within families. They're worn on the neck of people as protection, and sorcerers are terrified of them, and rightfully so. So if you're a cagey DM, you can kind of sense the possibilities with all these things I'm telling you in your game world. Well, first of all, we have the organized nature of magic in the world itself. And the good thing is you can have this make sense in both low and high magic worlds. In low magic worlds, maybe there's only, one or two schools. In higher magic worlds, maybe there's 4 or 5, like in this series. And while we're at it, let's change the term school. At least I will. Conclave, set, circle, sect, ring, coterie, league, sphere, body. These are just a few of the names I would personally use for a fantasy D&D version of these places over the term school. But hey, look, if school works for you, go ahead and use it. Now you have to determine why the magic users in your world may have organized themselves into these things. Is it to consolidate power? Is it to avoid persecution? Strength in numbers, so to speak. Is it merely tradition? Does it have a very specific purpose, like Drusus Achamian's mandate school being the keepers of knowledge that the world will eventually need? Now, you might have to kind of bend the rules with whatever rule system you're using. You could have certain schools focus only on certain kinds of spells. And by the way, I know spells in D&D are kind of separated into what they call schools, like evocation, abjuration, etc. But those are really more descriptive effects, in my opinion, and shouldn't be confused at all with what we're talking about. The reason being is that every magic user in D&D kind of chooses freely from spells available per level. So generally speaking, DMs don't enforce something like an abjuration-only policy for wizard characters. Now maybe they do for illusionists, but that's kind of a well-established subset. But what might work for our purposes is to pick 3 or 4 of those, what the book calls schools, but, the effects for wizards in your campaign, and then kind of hold them to it. For instance, let's create a school called the Emerald Conclave, which is a group of sorcerers devoted to holding back the armies of the undead at the rim of the world. Now, maybe they only focus on transmutation, evocation, abjuration, and even necromancy types of magic. Maybe in order to defeat their ancient undead foes and fulfill their purpose, they have to understand where those foes came from, hence the necromantic knowledge. But maybe that necromantic knowledge is only allowed to masters or high masters, let's say, levels 5 and higher. There are all sorts of adventuring possibilities here. The Emerald Conclave, in our example, can set a beginning character out on a seek for knowledge, essentially giving them a free hand, letting them adventure with no limitations. But at some point, maybe our wizard character may have to report back to his master tutor and let him know what he's been up to. This is also a way to impart spells to a character without ham-fistedly letting them find, spell books in a treasure pile. As time goes on, the tutor may begin to trust the character enough to become a spy in order to gain knowledge on a rival school, or perhaps even like the government or the throne itself. There may also be forbidden knowledge of long-lost dungeons or tombs down in the archives of the Emerald Conclave, and the character can maybe sneak down there and secretly copy all that information. Now, what would happen to them if maybe their master found out what the character did? Will they be rewarded for their ingenuity, or will they be hunted down? When the characters reach a certain level, perhaps, they're initiated into knowledge that only the most loyal are able to learn. Maybe a secret about the order itself or even the world. Something that kind of sets everything on its head. This would be great for kind of a mid-campaign twist. The point here is to give structure to the world itself, while bestowing a tiny bit of obligation and a healthy dose of freedom and opportunity to the magic-using characters. Every encounter with an NPC of a rival conclave is going to be full of tension and, from a game sense, possibility. There's also the interesting aspect of including something like the trinkets that I mentioned earlier. I wouldn't advise using something that's going to kill a wizard in your world instantly. That's going to upset either the players or the DM if he has a foe that he was holding back, and one lucky shot with one of these things does him in. But maybe you could use something that inflicts an automatic critical hit for max damage each time they're hit by it. Now, in our example world here, maybe there's a rare flower that only afflicts those with the mark of sorcery upon them. It's delicate and can only remain potent for a certain amount of time after it's been picked. But let's say if it's attached to an arrowhead using a special vine, or clumsily pressed into the flesh of a sorcerer, it's going to hurt. It's going to start to burn the unnatural stain of sorcery out of them. You could also use some form of, special waters, or just stick to the book's core model of just a stone that's been engraved with eldritch runes. Either way, they should be rare enough that they're not expecting it in every encounter, but they do sort of fear it in the back of their minds. Well, there you go. Are you already including these sort of magic schools, conclaves, what have you, in your campaign world? Would you try something like this? Let me know if you would in the comments below. Did you read the Prince of Nothing series? And if so, did you like it? Does it hold up to the classics of the genre? Or was it not your cup of tea? Either way, I would love to hear from you. And remember to join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for The Lair. That is our weekly live stream where me and a few of my friends goof off, talk about RPGs, especially D&D's continuing fall from grace, some internet drama, and of course, other news of the day. We always have a good time. All right, you guys take care. You have a great rest of your day, and we will talk soon. Peace.